Hello and welcome to Crestron and Microsoft's talk track today on multipurpose spaces. Thank you, Microsoft, for inviting us to talk on this. We're Crestron, for those who know. We've been around custom AV for a lot of years, and this is the perfect subject for us to speak on. What we'd like to do today, though, is actually focus on just talking at a high level around Crestron and the underlying technology stack that we do offer can come together and still deliver on that simple Microsoft user experience of one touch to join. In addition to that, Cameron will take us through some of the considerations and challenges that projects may encounter and definitely talk about the design phase. We'll also take you through a couple of key product lines which are very recent to us as well, which are actually we're getting a lot of questions around to help build out those equitable meeting experiences in very large spaces. And what I will say, though, is Crestron has a lot of technology. We have a tremendous amount of little black boxes with white logos, and it's very hard if we were to sit here and show presentations on all the different options that can actually build out the infrastructure that supports a Teams room system. You'll all want to kill me by the end of this. So a quick introduction on ourselves. I'll introduce my partner in crime today, Cameron Puckey. He's our director of the education market vertical team. In addition to that, he's also the director of the specification market team as well. So he's a particularly busy character. He's been with Crestron for close to 2 decades, although he doesn't look a day over 30. So he's got a tremendous amount of AV experience around the Crestron products and how they go into these types of spaces. In addition to that, he's worked with those 2 verticals. He gets a lot of exposure to the different types of projects and the different types of challenges those projects actually encounter during the design phase and the implementation phase as well. Certainly these projects can be set up for success, and hopefully we share a nugget of information when Cameron's talking about the challenges and considerations a bit later. Myself, I work in the Crestron team here in New South Wales in the enterprise and government verticals. I also support Cam in the specification markets in this region as well. Before I joined Crestron, I'd spent quite a few years in a very large enterprise, responsible as part of a very small team for developing the strategy and also the standards for AV and VC spaces enterprise-wide. That gave me a client-side perspective of these types of spaces as well, and they're very difficult to standardise on, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But what we did do is we actually came up with some design patterns which we actually pushed out across multiple sites, and that was the best we could do around standardisation. Today at Crestron, I help people find in the government and enterprise verticals the right Crestron solution for their workplace fit outs, be it a greenfield site, so wet concrete project, or a fit out, or a technology uplift or refresh. The other thing, we should move along. So I should cover off on who Crestron is as a company for those who don't know. Crestron is a global manufacturer of audiovisual and UC hardware. We've been around for 50 years and we are headquartered out of the US. We are a Microsoft Teams Room OEM partner, and we do have a full range of Crestron solutions. So not just the solutions that we're talking about today, which are for the multi-purpose spaces, but we also have small spaces, medium spaces, large rooms as well. One of the things that we should talk about as well is that Crestron, as that OEM partner for Microsoft Teams Rooms, we are the only OEM partner that also has the additional components to build out the underlying infrastructure to help support the function of these multipurpose spaces. What we do is fundamentally with all of the different bits and pieces we can put into those systems, we can actually glue all of those third-party components and our components together, resulting in seamless integration and still deliver on the simplicity of use that the Microsoft Teams Room interface actually provides you. Not a touch screen. So multi-purpose high-value spaces, more than just a room in a box. These types of spaces are very difficult to standardise on. And what I will say is that these types of spaces nearly always necessitate the need for additional components to build out that infrastructure to satisfy the different modes of use that these rooms actually have. And that's why it is more than just a room in a box. There isn't a kit that will do a multi-purpose space. Now, in saying that, that's not to discredit all of the other OEM partners or even ourselves where we do produce simple room systems. It's just simply they have a purpose and they meet a specific set of needs. But when it gets into the multi-purpose spaces, particularly with multiple modes of use, there's a lot of other things that need to happen. And that usually, to answer those questions, you need additional technology. What is important, though, is when built well, they will deliver outstanding results for the company in terms of value and also user experience as well. What I'd like to cover on is the shape of these rooms in terms of what they look like, in terms of use cases, and then also the quantity of, have been greatly influenced over the last few years. So one of the things that's happening quite a lot is the space optimization challenge. The corporate real estate teams are being pressured to actually reduce their office footprint. That's quite common. It could be for different reasons, and I don't think that this is a secret. It's something that we can say, and a couple of reasons, and by no means an exhaustive list at all. Could be cost pressures to the business, reducing operational expenditure. It could also be as a result of, over the last decade, a lot of businesses moved to activity-based working or agile, whatever they wanted to call it. And with that particular model, you could get more people into less space. So they were reducing office space anyway, but also the deployment of the hybrid working models as a result of the last few years as well. So what we're seeing is less people actually go to the office. So corporate real estate teams are being pressured to actually reduce the footprint. Why that's important is because once upon a time in a fit out where there may have been 4 rooms, perhaps now there is only 2 or even 1. So these rooms are being pushed to deliver on more modes of use, so you can utilize the space even further. The other thing is corporate real estate teams and the workplace teams are also being challenged by their organisations to build exciting places and collaborative environments so people want to actually go into the office. So the organisation actually earns the commute from their workers. They're trying to entice people back into the office. One of the ideas around that, which is something which is a whole presentation, is actually building or designing offices as a destination. And there's a couple of aspects to that. If you come onto the stand, we can talk about what that actually means. But every organisation has a different interpretation of what the hybrid working model is for them. Some are actually onto their second iteration of what that actually is. Perhaps some aren't even doing it at all. But what we see as a common criteria amongst all of those different organisations is that building outstanding facilities is very, very important to encourage the staff to come back into the office, but also to keep them engaged and make it an exciting place to be. The other thing that's shaping these type of spaces as well that we're seeing is how to actually extend that frictionless Teams room experience from the simple room up into the most complex of spaces. We actually hear a lot of horror stories of projects in the past, sins of the past, where clients have been left with tremendous amounts of these large rooms, which are just unused because for various reasons, but to list a couple, the technology is too hard to use, the technology is unreliable, it just doesn't meet the requirements anymore of the business and how they like to operate in that space. And in fact, to go a step further, is the people who use these kind of spaces a lot, and this is I say this with all respect, but just to highlight a key point, is a lot of the time it could be the C-suite, general managers, very senior people who are very unforgiving when the room doesn't work. So building out a frictionless experience and how that room comes together is also something that's driving the shape of what these rooms look like as well. Again, going back on that experience is how do we actually build that experience such that you get that one touch to join for the simple user as well. That is very possible in this space to be able to do that. So the simple user can literally be able to go up and use that Teams interface like he or she would in any other room. What is important though is with a Crestron solution, you can also give the page flip and get to that extra granular control that the power user or the admin user might want to actually fine tune an event to specific needs. Equitable meeting experiences. There's a drive to, well, with the technology in the market today, we're getting closer to be able to providing meeting equity in more spaces. And certainly with the introduction of our Crestron Intelligent Video range, which Cam will cover off in a little bit more detail, we're in a good position to be able to drive that meeting equity into these larger spaces as well. I won't spoil Cam's story. The one that I'm quite passionate about that influences these spaces as well is the uplift in technology to satisfy hybrid operations teams. Operations teams also work hybrid. It could be, depending on what the model is, you might not necessarily have curated spaces, and the people who support those spaces are actually working from home that day. So the technology, a lot of this technology in years gone by was completely off network, and there was no ability to be able to interrogate that system without actually being in the room. So we're seeing a lot of spaces being uplifted to make sure that the remote support team also has the ability to interrogate that system and provide support to the clients. An uplift in the operational experience will always have a positive impact on the user experience as well. You know, as a rough rule of thumb, we see the standard rooms, which we're not talking about today, but the standard rooms usually fill out about 80% of the fit outs. And then around about 10 to 20% of the rooms are the custom rooms, and the multipurpose space fits in that custom room category. And they are the rooms that have a disproportionately high number of support tickets against them. So making sure that you're able to give the remote support team the ability to be able to provide support without necessarily being there is a key way of actually delivering a room and still give a great user experience. The other aspect of management, support and management, which at Crestron we're quite proud of, is we have a cloud management suite. Why that exists is giving the ability to those clients, even if they're at home and or the end users who are providing the support, even if they're at home and they're off network, they can still hit XIO Cloud and still see the environment. And that we'll mention that capability a little bit later at a high level. And then Max Davies from our company tomorrow in this same room is actually giving a very detailed presentation on what that is and what that means to businesses. So just to quickly cover off on this as an idea, multi-purpose spaces, it can be anything. Across the government and enterprise verticals, I hear different use cases mentioned all the time. The training rooms, conference rooms, extra large meeting rooms, war rooms, crisis management rooms, and it could be any combination of those different modes. And even in the evening, it could be turned into a cocktail space, which I'm sure this regularly does. Then the next morning, it's back into some sort of meeting mode as well. These spaces do have to deliver on these different type of modes. In fact, from an education point of view, tertiary institutions actually have a very different view on what these actually look like.
Yeah, they do. And hello to everyone. There's some familiar faces in the room, which always helps you feel more at ease. Putting my education cap on and that vertical that I manage across ANZ, it's actually a really interesting space to have this conversation about. Number one, because universities aren't just there for learning and teaching purposes, they're there for research, and they're also massive businesses. They have an entire administrative side to a university that they have the same challenges and the same functional needs and requirements of meeting rooms as what Graydon's covering off about enterprise and government. But yes, of course, as a teaching and learning institution, universities are massive adopters of the complex type of arena, I'll even call it. That might be a 300-seat tiered theatre, and that has complexities such as dual projection, or what we're seeing now is great big LED walls because of the affordability factor there. Repeater screens for all of the participants in the theatre to be able to see the content being presented. But now, whether it's pre-COVID, post-COVID, or where we are now, universities have had to move to this, I'll call the term high flex mode of teaching, where they're not just delivering the content to students in front of them, they're delivering it to remote participants. Those remote students are paying the exact same fee as the person sitting in the chair. So they need to be given the same opportunity to learn, and they can't be put at a disadvantage because we didn't install the right technology. So tiered lecture theatres, one of the images up there, that's a perfect classic example of a flat floor collaborative teaching space, multiple pods where students get broken up into breakout groups to do their work, then they come back together to discuss. Now we see that breakout group isn't just students in person, they're joined by someone that is in a virtual breakout room that is enabled via Microsoft Teams rooms. So we need to consider not just how the flow of the learning teaching is achieved in the room, but also for the students remote as well. Down the bottom there, well, that's a pretty typical classroom. I know that's how I learnt. I literally had a teacher stand and deliver to me. I had to listen, learn, and then take that away, do an exam, same scenario. That same style of teaching, that pedagogy, we still need to cater for the high flex environment, which can be facilitated via Microsoft Teams Room. But the important thing now is that academic delivering the learning needs to be heard and seen as much as the students in the room. Apologies to those remotely. I hope I didn't wander out of the frame. Grader, on to the next one.
Yeah, so no, just quickly, the point here is a lot of these spaces deliver on different modes of use, and it could be in any combination of how the users want to use it. And it's critically important to understand the most amount, or the use cases that you're planning for at the beginning of the project. And that will help you design the project that you want, because the underlying infrastructure design is going to be as a result of what those requirements actually are. However, it is likely that you won't know every single use case for the project, and that is true. So it is really important to also keep an eye on future flexible, so you retain the agility to be able to deliver on new modes as they come up, be it in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or further down the line. So this is a good opportunity. So Cam, you get a lot of exposure to the market in terms of the people who are designing these spaces. So in education, it's the engineers they do a lot of stuff internally. They still engage AV consultants as well. In fact, quite regularly we see AV consultants engaged by businesses to help them, because this is a very specialist skill and they want to leverage all of their experiences. Yep. So can you, with your experiences yourself, can you take us through some of the challenges and considerations?
Yeah, and I should say up front, these are only some of the challenges and considerations that we've taken from learnings, past projects that some have gone well, some have gone well, but had a little bit of maybe we should have tweaked it or tried this different approach. They're both challenges and considerations, and they're certainly not in any priority order. But at the top, we do have there bringing meeting equity to the room. So that's an obvious. We've already covered that off. We need to make sure that the person on the far end of that call, our remote participants in whatever the scenario is, can hear and see and feel like they are part of that experience, whether it's a meeting, a project meeting, a learning teaching situation. They need to feel like they're involved, or really they're sitting on the peripherals and they're not going to add value. So we need to cater for that. Defining the requirements. Complex spaces, there's lots of people in this room that know this already. Complex spaces require you to define the requirements as you go into it. We can't get halfway through a project, we've defined our bill of materials, the architectural design of the space is in place, and then we realised, there was actually this use case that this stakeholder really needed for this room, and we haven't catered for it. We need to define the requirements up front, and sure, maybe there's some scope creep. We've all seen scope creep. We always build for it, little bit of allowance, but we need to try and define as best as we can up front what is the use case and the application that this complex meeting room, teaching space, open area of any type is going to cater for. That means we're in a position to deal with that last minute request, okay? Architectural considerations. Grading used the term before of, wet concrete. It's great when we're building a building right from the start and we're involved at the early stages of a greenfield project. We also face plenty where there are architectural limitations because of a historic overlay, something like that. We can't punch a hole in the wall over there. We can't get the cable for our camera that we want to put right there because we don't have the cable path. The architect says no, it's going to ruin their beautiful surface that they've thought on for weeks, years. They dreamt it up, whatever they were doing. We can't put that piece of AV equipment that's ugly there. We have to stand up and fight for that, but it is an architectural consideration. It's a challenge, okay? Who are the correct stakeholders? Well, number one, helps if we know the sponsor of the project. If we're getting good with the sponsor of the project, then they're going to help us in our cause and our journey to try and make sure we get the right technology installed into this space. And from there down, it flows to, the stakeholders that are going to use the space, they're going to own the space, that are going to manage the space beyond handover. So we need to know who all of those stakeholders are, not just from our immediate involvement in the project, but right through to handover and perhaps even through our DLP and beyond DLP as well, okay? Defect liability period for those.
Not data loss prevention.
No, not data loss prevention, if anyone's got that background in the room. Who is supporting these spaces? Is it a curated space or not? What do I mean by that? Is there actually an in-house AV team or an outsourced AV team that when we have a function in this multi-room combinable space where we open up the walls, we point the projector or we activate the projector that's facing this way today rather than that way tomorrow? Is there a team's going to get in there at 7 a.m. in the morning and set that space up, and they are trained and capable in driving the technology? That's cool. If we know there's going to be that type of team in place, we can probably go a little bit deeper in the tech and how we want to be able to set that up. If it is a space that is complex, but still really is just on the meeting organizer that booked that room to walk in, hopefully press go and have the confidence that when they put on a little lapel microphone or they pick up something like this, it's all going to work for them. We need to design around that type of space or that type of support as well, okay? Flexibility for future use. I can roll flexibility and scalability into a sort of common thread there. Flexibility probably can be covered off in that we have a space, it has many different room modes. We need to cater for that because it is a flexible space. That's what we're calling it. We're not calling it a training space. It's not a project room. It is a flexible space that meets the purpose on a day-to-day need for the business for any of those types of use cases. Scalability, I'll still roll into it though, because when we're talking future use, we have rooms that may not necessarily have a set life cycle refresh period. At the end of 4 years, 5 years, whatever that is, we would all love to think the room gets a nice upgrade, but it doesn't. But we still need to add a couple more displays into this room to be able to expand on the initial applications and use that the room was built for. So we need to ensure that the technology we're putting into the space has the room to grow and can be scaled up and down. And finally, the technology as a challenge. What I'm talking about there is we have a platform, Microsoft Teams Room, that is brilliant, but it's the peripheral devices in these complex spaces that can cause us the biggest challenges here. I will put it out there and say the biggest challenge I come up against at the moment, whether it's a consultant or a university asking me the question, is how do we cater for USB-C? We want USB-C there, in the floor box down here, and we want the full feature set. We need that to be 60 watts of power. We want data, we want audio, we want video. Well, that's great, but that's 20 gig according to the USB-C spec. You show me a bit of twisted pair copper that can push 20 gig. It can't. There are realities in the world that we need to be able to massage into the conversation with our end users to make sure they understand there are going to be some limitations that are placed upon us purely because of where technology is today. I'm not saying in 5 years' time we won't have compression or some other means of transporting USB-C, but as fleets of laptops within businesses pretty much are now standardising on nothing but that USB-C connector on there, it's becoming more challenging to say to the client, we're going to give you a HDMI and a USB type A connector. But there are challenges. So yes, there might be USB-C, but we're going to have to downgrade that to USB 2. We can't give you USB 3.2 full bandwidth data transport and extended for 100 meters because you've decided you want to put, a projector at this end of the room. Everything else goes down in the comms room at the far end of the building, and we need to just deal with that. There are challenges there because of the technology itself. Wireless power, wireless everything. Let's just do it. Yeah. Wireless over fibre. So we'll move on, Grado.
So where does Crestron fit into these types of spaces? As you can see, we put a lovely Crestron image up there, and that would be what the end user sees. It's very similar to this room here, actually. Speakers, displays, touchscreens, multiple cameras, room booking, room scheduling panel out the front. There is also the additional Crestron components which actually complement all of this as well. And what that looks like, and upon reflection, that's probably very difficult to read, and I do apologise. I thought it was going to be a bigger screen. The heart of a Crestron system in these multi-purpose places is what we call our C100 or our CX100. Great naming convention. But what that is Teams room compute on a tray, and then we also have a 10-inch touch interface. And from at that point there, you extend out that capability and you build from there. So that always retains as the heart of the system. So connecting everything into that C100 is our Crestron control systems. Now those control systems can be either hardware-based, or we also have a server-based application as well. In fact, we have one clever partner that actually offers that as a service and can build it highly available should organisations deem the criticality of that space enough to be able to warrant that. Those Crestron control systems are also your point of connection to the base building systems. So they've got the I/O on board to be able to connect to base building lighting, blinds, even air conditioning. The Crestron control system also has some, let's call them peripherals, that can also feed into that as well. So one of those, as an example, is actually the PoE motion sensor. And that PoE motion sensor can actually, and I'm a huge fan of this from an energy management point of view, but it can fundamentally activate technology should you choose to put that routine in there. And also, more importantly, keep technology off. So for lifecycle management of the hardware, but also for energy management, make sure the technology is kept off. That same motion sensor can then connect to the room scheduling hardware that we also have as well, running Microsoft Teams room booking application. So you can actually set some parameters around checking in and set up behaviours. So if people actually, as a result of the hybrid working day, don't actually turn up to the office, that the room is released should it be unoccupied within a configurable threshold. Additionally, we also have Crestron audio products. So we have a range of speakers. So we have pendant speakers, ceiling speakers, in-wall speakers. There's speakers to, and definitely from an architectural point of view, there's lots of questions around which speakers to pick. We've got a range of speakers. To complement that, we also have Crestron amplifiers with the new X series amplifiers. And going back on the supportability in XIO, we've also got a network connected amplifier to extend that visibility for the remote support team to be to the edge as far as you can possibly go, so you can see what's going on. We also have wireless presentation systems, Crestron Air Media. It's been around for a very long time, but the latest iteration of it, well, the last iteration was Miracast, but the latest iteration now has the Connect adapter to simplify that connection even more. And that's running USB-C technology, so it's driverless. It's not a external mass storage device where you need to run an executable. It will plug into a Windows 10 or 11 laptop and leverage DisplayPort Alt mode and will go point to point and be able to connect. The other thing is it'll work with Mac laptops as well, because I have a client that literally is a 50-50 split of Mac and Windows, and they've tested it across both fleets and it works. Wireless presentation is still relevant in these spaces. Although a lot of meetings are hosted where there will be remote participants, there are still some in-room, no video conversations where people want the flexibility to be able to present from anywhere. Air Media also gives you the ability to have multiple sources up on the screen. So you can have 4 people in the room if you wanted to, actually all presenting to the same screen. Yeah, from there, I should mention, gluing it all together was what I mentioned before, which is XIO, our cloud management platform, where all Crestron network connected devices now will go out to XIO and report into XIO. It's not like the old days of Crestron Fusion where that needed to be programmed. Every product that comes out has XIO capabilities. That's a great place to centrally manage these devices and monitor them as well, also set intelligent alerts against them. But then probably the two really key product ranges Cam is going to take us through quickly now, and particularly one which is of really high interest in these sorts of spaces, which is the Crestron Intelligent Video.
Just before you move on, Grado, I am going to mention one thing. This space, so I'll just go back a slide, mate. One other thing that we also need to consider here when we're looking, especially at a space like this, and it's staring at us in the room right here, even if it's not in use, is hearing augmentation. Okay. Now, we are beheld in a lot of builds defined, whether it's under the BCA, DDA, whatever code you want to reference, there are places where we must install hearing assisted listening systems. Okay. A lot of the solutions you buy out of a box, including a number of Crestron's models, don't cater for this very well. And there's also ways around how they can define the use case of that space as to whether it must adhere to BCA and DDA requirements. But a space like this, where potentially there's even the public coming in and participating in events within that room, that definitely would need to meet those codes. So this is where our C and our CX systems, when they're paired with a proper audio DSP, and Crestron doesn't do DSP, so I'm not spruiking a Crestron product here, but to think of those defining the requirements, that space there is the perfect example of where we must put in at the heart of a system, of our Teams room system, the ability to connect to hearing augmentation. So I just wanted to call that one out as well.
I'm actually seeing it more and more in corporate fit outs, even down at the standard 4-person meeting room level. It's being deployed more and more.
So, sorry, and moving on.
Yep.
So
intelligent video.
Intelligent video. I mean, we're talking about really all we're talking about here at the moment, really, we're talking about a video collaboration platform. It's video. Audio is still king. We need audio before anyone can have the meeting. Unless you can lip read and the video is fantastic, it's probably not going to be a very successful meeting. So audio is king, but really the video is there to allow participants remote and near to be able to see how are people reacting in the room? Are people buying into what is being delivered to them? How are they all working together to come up with the resolution to this problem, to work on this project, whatever it is they're there to achieve? Video is a massive part of that when we're talking about far end participants. And in the large complex space, really, you don't quite get that equity of experience when it's a single small USB camera at the front of the room. And again, I'm not bagging anything there because Crestron partners with a number of providers that sell those types of cameras. But what we need to consider in some of these complex spaces, and I'll call it out, a lot of the times this is the big exec boardrooms because everyone in that board thinks they're the most important person in the room and they want the camera on them. I'll do a Madonna dance there, you know, I want to be framed when I'm having my say. So the type of intelligent video solutions that we have seen adopted massively, and this is a spruik for the One Beyond brand that Crestron acquired a couple of years ago. The cameras that we can put forward for a room range from PTZ cameras, smart framing cameras to frame everyone in the room, auto tracking cameras to follow me, who's a shocking culprit at wandering. I don't do well when I stand still. So someone to follow that pacer up and down the front of the classroom or the large meeting space. But they all need to be designed so they work in sync, whether it is a combination of multiple PTZs around a large executive boardroom that can cut, like we've got a producer or a director there calling cut to camera 1, cut to camera 3, cut to camera 5. We need a hands-off experience that still allows us to create an outcome where in this room, the video feeding into our Teams room system can give the far end participants that equitable experience. What you see here, the little moving demonstration there, is our designer software for the One Beyond solution, where we've uploaded the layout for the room, we've defined where the seating positions are, and then we can start defining, we need cameras here, 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 and here. If we're going to capture people on that side of the table, this side of the table, head of the table, and that presentation spot over there, okay, where we're actually going to allow for a little bit of pacing backwards and forth. We can start designing the system in this software, and then we tie that into the audio, where we take triggers from a microphone that might be this, it might be a ceiling mounted mic, so that when we get an audio trigger from the person speaking, we've got that camera defined, ready to switch and capture them in that true video edit style of experience. Like I said, it's not this, let's make everyone dizzy as the camera tries to find the person speaking around the room like that. It's a clean cut. As we go from this person speaking, that person speaking, now they're actually back and forth together. Let's put them side by side in a framed dual window output, okay? So the One Beyond experience, or what we call the intelligent video experience we can create in Crestron, we're seeing a lot of adoption for, because it does cater for these type of complex spaces, okay? I'll give a quick spruik, I know you're going to as well, Grado, but we actually have this on display down on our stand. So if it's of interest, please come down.
It may also be in a very notable company's boardroom over in the US. I'm not sure if we're supposed to say it, but yeah, I'll just say that.
Yeah. The experience we can create here does really surpass a lot of others on the market. It's all AI driven. Of course, it's Teams certified. This feeds into your Microsoft Teams room system, and it just creates that experience that allows the far end to really feel like they're there around the room, okay? The other use cases, things like town halls. If we have a great big open space like Graydon showed before, and once a month the CEO gets up and he delivers a message, and he's doing that out of Sydney, but of course we've got offices in Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane, wherever, well then we can need to design a camera system that is going to capture him, and maybe there's someone else gets up and talks at the mic stand over there. We can cater for any type of scenario, okay?
Can I mention, it's also worth noting that there's no complex licensing structure around this as well. You buy the product from us once and it's ready to rock and roll. There's no license associated with it.
Yeah, I should actually also say there's multiple room layouts. Like, just because we've got a complex space where the room layout looks like it's east-west orientated today, doesn't mean we can't also then upload a second configuration that when we select the room mode, that all of a sudden we're now going north-south. I'm definitely not following the compass here, ignore which way I'm doing this, but yeah, you get the idea that essentially you can even have multiple room layouts catered for, and we leverage the same camera system. We're just uploading a different file that has been designed and commissioned for the use case in that particular room mode.
In fact, in Sydney, with our demonstration room, we have 6 modes of use. It could be more, but we just figured that this was the best way to do it. Let's just see what the guys in Melbourne do with their new One Beyond space, Cameron. Any
something bigger and better.
Yeah, of course. So the next thing, which is something we're very strong in, is the video distribution systems.
Yeah, I mean, this is Crestron's bread and butter. We've been pushing audio and video around the place, you know, almost from day dot. So we now certainly are faced by the challenges I mentioned earlier, USB-C, but let's just focus on the A and the V part of that USB-C feature set. We really, in complex spaces, have the need to be able to allow users to connect their device, like we have here, but it might be in a floor box, as there is down there. When we open the room up, it might be down that end of the room, and we need to be able to feed the content, wherever that's connected within this space, back to the location where it feeds in and is ingested into the Microsoft Teams room system. Now, I mentioned before about scalability, flexibility. I'm going to give a blatant spruik here for the NVX product. mainly because it is an AV over IP solution. It is unparalleled when we're talking AV over IP to be able to leverage network, because as long as we have a data point somewhere or can get a new data point to where we might want to add a display, then we can simply leverage that data point to connect an encoder or a decoder, and straight away now we can add 2 more displays to the room, 3 more displays to the room, that sort of thing. So the scalability is much more viable than if we had put in a fixed frame matrix that was 8 ins and 8 outs, and we populated both of those inputs and outputs from day one of the installation. We can't add any more to that. It's fixed. AV over IP, and in our world, that's the NVX product family, has all the scalability you want. We just need to make sure there's data, check the network is in place, is going to cater for our bandwidth requirements, and then we can really scale up and down however required. All right. NVX also plays nicely because Graydon's mentioned one of our big sellers is the CX100 system. That caters for BYOD handoff, where we're not actually going to host the call from the in-room native Teams room system today. For whatever reason or another, we want to actually connect and host the call from a user's own device. I'll call that BYOM. Others call it BYOD, but I like the bring your own meeting acronym. I think that's a little bit more accurate in that use case. So we're bringing our own meeting into this room. Sure, it's got an in-room Teams system installed, but we're going to host it from the laptop. We connect in and we hand off all the peripherals to the user's device. If we want to be able to do that at multiple points around the room, well then NVX is the perfect box to do that because it's got our audio visual connections, but it also acts as a USB KVM switch. We can transport USB 2 data anywhere across the network and associate this connection point with that point over there. So we can link the user's device here and link it back to all the peripherals that are connected to the Flex system back in the rack over there, and we're carrying that USB over the NVX box. So it's a double use case there for that solution.
Okay. We've pontificated for quite some time. We're about to get.
We'll round it up. Go for it, mate.
Yeah, look, XIO Cloud. I mentioned it before. It's our SaaS offering. It's built in Microsoft Azure's IoT hub. All Crestron network connected devices now have an XIO capability. They report out to XIO. It has been extended recently to be able to do monitoring of third-party devices, so displays, even DSPs, other devices in the room where maybe there isn't a monitoring platform in place. Max Davies tomorrow, I think it's at midday in this same room, is actually doing a very detailed presentation on XIO, so I certainly won't steal my boss's thunder on that one. So we probably didn't leave enough time for questions because I was getting the hurry up. It's kind of getting to the end of the 45 minutes. But what I was going to do was, unless there's an urgent question, feel more than welcome to throw it at us now if you like. Otherwise, I wanted to really extend the offer to actually come and see us on the stand because each of these spaces is quite unique in its own, and actually come and challenge us and put down what you're trying to achieve, and let's see if we can actually help you in those sorts of spaces as well.
Cool. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time.